I am Winifred, and I am 68 years old. I thought the greatest pain of my life was watching my son Daniel pass away at 42 from a sudden heart attack. But I was wrong. That pain only paved the way for a different kind of cruelty, coming from the very person I once called my own, who pushed me out of the house filled with memories of my boy right after his funeral. And then, in that solemn will reading room, she even smiled at me and said, "You are not getting a single cent." But she had no idea about the final gift Daniel left for me. Before I tell you about the gift that changed everything, I am curious to know where you are listening to this story from. Is it from somewhere quiet or amidst the hustle of daily life? Let me know down in the comments. And if you would like to walk alongside a woman learning to rise from the very bottom of betrayal, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know. My life in Cedar Glen was a quiet tapestry of simple pleasures. For 30 years, since my husband Martin passed, my small blue house with its wraparound porch was my sanctuary. My greatest joy was my Sunday morning ritual. At 10 o'clock sharp, the phone would ring. It was Daniel. We would talk for an hour, sometimes more. He would tell me about his work as a software architect in Boston, the challenges of raising a teenager and a preteen, and his latest project, restoring an old vintage radio. I would tell him about the new roses I was trying to grow, the latest gossip from the Cedar Glen Public Library, where I volunteered every Tuesday, and the stubborn groundhog that kept getting into my vegetable patch. Those calls were my anchor. Daniel married Pamela 15 years ago. She was from a well-to-do family in Connecticut, 10 years his junior, with a career in high-end event planning. She was always perfectly polite, but our conversations never moved beyond the weather and the children. I tried. I sent handmade quilts for the kids when they were babies, and I never visited their modern Boston townhouse without my famous apple cinnamon crumble. Pamela would thank me place the dish on her marble countertop, and the subject would change. My grandchildren, Ethan and Lily, were the bridge. Ethan had Daniel's thoughtful eyes, and Lily had his laugh. They loved my stories about their father as a boy, how he once turned my entire garden into a makeshift fort, much to my pretended dismay. The call that shattered my world did not come on a Sunday. It came at 11:17 on a Thursday night. The voice on the other end was a stranger's, a nurse from Massachusetts General. My son had collapsed at work. It was critical. The 3-hour drive to Boston was a blur of darkness and desperate prayers. When I arrived, disheveled and breathless, I found Pamela in a sleek waiting room chair, her posture rigid, her face composed. She looked up as I rushed in. "He's gone," she said, her voice flat, devoid of the tremor I felt, shaking my own body. It was an aortic aneurysm. They said it was. Silent. I reached for her, needing to share this unbearable weight, but she stiffened slightly. "The doctors need some decisions." "I've handled the immediate thing," she said, standing up. "You should sit. You've had a long drive." In that moment, the first crack appeared. Her words were not comfort. They were a gentle, firm reminder that she was in charge, and I was now an observer in my own son's tragedy. The hollowness that followed was worse than the initial shock. It was the feeling of being ushered to the sidelines at the very moment my heart was breaking. The funeral Pamela arranged was at a contemporary funeral home in downtown Boston. It was all sleek lines, minimalist flower arrangements, and a digital slideshow of Daniel's professional accomplishments. There was no mention of the boy who loved catching fireflies, or the man who called his mother every Sunday. I asked if I could read a poem, one I knew Daniel loved from his childhood. Pamela had patted my hand, her own hand, cool and smooth. I think we want to keep the tone uplifted and dignified, Winifred. A poem it might be too much for the children. I felt the sting. She had not called me Mom in years. I was Winifred, and my grief was deemed potentially disruptive. After the service, I went back to their townhouse, a place that never felt like a home to me. I wanted to be near the children, to hold them, to let our shared loss connect us. Ethan, 15, was closed off, lost in his headphones. Lily, 12, clung to her mother. Pamela moved through the rooms like a CEO managing a crisis, fielding calls, thanking guests. On the third day, needing to feel close to Daniel, I ventured into his home office. The room was neat, almost sterile. On a bookshelf, I saw the old, leather-bound journal I had given him for college. My fingers were just brushing its spine when Pamela's voice came from the doorway. "I'm having a service come in next week to pack all this up. Most of it will go to storage, or be donated." She said it casually, as if discussing old linens. I thought, maybe I could keep this, I said, my voice small, holding up the journal. She gave a tight smile. "That's sweet, but the children might want things like that later. I'll make sure it's kept safe." The real blow came that evening. She asked me to sit in the living room. "Winifred," she began, her hands folded in her lap. "This has been so hard on everyone. And this house, it's just full of memories. For me and the kids, it's becoming overwhelming. We need a fresh start. I've decided to sell it." My heart began to pound. "And for you," she continued, her tone softening into something that felt more condescending than kind. "I know you have your lovely little house in Cedar Glen. You're settled there. You have your routine, your friends. Wouldn't you be more comfortable in your own space? The children need to heal, and having family around. Sometimes it complicates the grief process." The message was clear, polished, and utterly brutal. I was being evicted from my son's life, and my presence was framed as an inconvenience to my grandchildren's healing. I packed my small suitcase, kissed Ethan and Lily on their cheeks, feeling their confused reluctance, and drove back to New Hampshire in a daze of fresh, profound loss. Cedar Glen did not feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a waiting room. The silence in my little blue house was oppressive. Every Sunday at 10, I would stare at the silent phone, the absence of Daniel's call, a physical ache. I tried calling the children. Sometimes, Lily would answer, her voice quiet, saying she had homework. Often it went to voicemail. Pamela's texts were brief and infrequent. "Kids are fine, busy with school." 2 months after Daniel's death, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived, bearing the embossed logo of Hartman and Pierce, attorneys at law in Boston. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a formal notice for the reading of Daniel's last will and testament. A flicker of something, hope maybe, or just the need for a final connection, sparked in my chest. Perhaps Daniel had left me a letter, a token, something to tell me he was thinking of me, that he knew how much I loved him. Maybe even a small financial provision, something to ease my retirement years. It was not greed. It was the desperate need of a mother for one last sign of love from her child. The night before the reading, I took out my best dress, a simple navy blue sheath I had worn to Daniel's college graduation. I polished my shoes. I felt like a soldier, preparing for a battle I did not understand. The drive back to Boston was a journey through a gray landscape that matched my mood. I rehearsed staying calm, being dignified, no matter what. The offices of Hartman and Pierce were all dark wood, muted carpets, and the smell of old paper and lemon polish. It felt like a place where emotions went to die. Pamela was already there, seated in a large leather chair. She wore a tailored black suit, her hair perfect. Ethan and Lily sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in their formal clothes. They gave me small, hesitant smiles that broke my heart all over again. The lawyer, Mr. Pierce, was an older man with a stern face and sharp eyes behind rimless glasses. He did not smile. He gestured for me to sit opposite the family. He began to read in a dry, monotone voice. The will was, as I suppose many are, a dense document of legalities. The substantial assets, the townhouse, the investment portfolios, the retirement accounts, were left in a trust for Pamela, with the children as beneficiaries. There was a charitable donation to the American Heart Association. The words flowed over me, a river of cold, hard facts. My name was not mentioned, not once. With each passing clause, the room seemed to grow colder. I looked down at my hands, knotted together in my lap, the skin thin and spotted with age. I felt invisible, erased. Mr. Pierce finished the main text and looked up. "Are there any questions regarding the disposition of the estate as detailed?" he asked. A silence hung in the air. Then Pamela shifted. She looked directly at me, and her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth, only a terrible polished triumph. "Winifred," she said, her voice clear and loud in the quiet room, "I know you might have been hoping for something. I want to be clear so there's no misunderstanding later. Daniel and I discussed all of this extensively. You have your own life, your own home. We felt it was important for the children's future to be secure. So with all due respect," she paused, letting the words sink their venomous teeth, "you will not get a cent from his estate. This was his wish." The air left my lungs. The humiliation was so complete, so public, witnessed by my grandchildren and this stern stranger. It was not just about money. It was a final, violent severing. It was her telling me and everyone in that room that I was nothing, that my son had deemed me nothing. A hot tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek. I had no words. My world, already shattered, was now being ground into dust. Just as I thought I might disintegrate, right there in that leather chair, Mr. Pierce cleared his throat. He had been watching, his expression unreadable. He placed the main will document carefully to the side. He picked up a smaller sealed envelope that had been lying beneath it. A faint, almost imperceptible change came over his stern features. It was not quite a smile, but a subtle softening around his eyes. "There is a final codicil," he announced, his voice gaining a different texture, slightly warmer. "A separate, personal bequest. It was sealed with instructions to be read only after the primary will was fully disclosed." Pamela's smug expression froze, then fractured into confusion. She leaned forward. "What is this?" There was no other document. "There is, Mrs. Delaney," Mr. Pierce said calmly. He broke the seal and extracted a single sheet of paper. He adjusted his glasses and began to read, and his voice, for the first time, held a hint of something resembling gentleness. "To my dearest mother, Winifred, you taught me that family isn't just blood, it's the heart, and that home isn't four walls, it's where your heart belongs. I know you'll understand. The key to Haven Ridge is yours. Go there. Everything you need is there. All my love, Daniel." The room was utterly still. Pamela looked bewildered. "Haven Ridge. What is Haven Ridge? What key?" Mr. Pierce looked at me. "Mrs. Delaney, your son, several years ago, purchased a small recreational property. a cabin on approximately 2 acres of wooded land in the White Mountains near the town of Bartlett, New Hampshire. The title is held solely in his name. This codicil legally transfers full and exclusive ownership, along with all contents and access rights, to you, Winifred Marie Delaney. It is not part of the marital estate. It is a separate asset, and his wishes regarding it are unequivocal. He then reached into his desk drawer and produced a single, old-fashioned brass key on a simple leather fob. He walked around the desk and placed it gently in my open, trembling palm. The metal was cool and solid. I closed my fingers around it. It was not just a key. It was a life raft. Pamela began to protest, her voice rising. "This is absurd. That's marital property. He can't just—" "He can. And he did." Mrs. Delaney, Mr. Pierce interrupted his voice, returning to its professional steel. "The paperwork is all in order. The purchase was made with separate funds, and the deed is clear." He turned back to me. "The address and directions are in the envelope." I stood up. My legs felt weak, but a new strength, fierce and quiet, was flooding my veins. I looked at Pamela, her face now flushed with anger. I looked at my grandchildren, Ethan's eyes wide with a dawning understanding. I did not say a word to her. I simply held the key tight, met her gaze, and said, "Thank you for showing me who you really are, and thank you, Daniel, for remembering who I am." I turned and walked out of that cold, beautiful room, the key pressing into my palm, a tiny solid promise against my skin. The drive north to the White Mountains was a pilgrimage. With each mile that took me further from Boston, the tight knot in my chest began to loosen. I followed the directions to a narrow, unpaved road, winding up through dense pines. At the end of it, tucked into a clearing, was Haven Ridge. It was not a grand cabin. It was modest, built of weathered cedar with a stone chimney and a wide porch overlooking a vista of rolling, tree-covered mountains. It was a little worn, a little lonely, but it was breathtaking. My breath caught. I remembered this place. Not this exact cabin, but these mountains. When Daniel was 12, Martin and I brought him camping here. He caught his first trout in the stream that ran a half-mile down the slope. We told ghost stories by the fire. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The interior smelled of pine wood smoke and dust. It was sparsely furnished, a robust stone fireplace, a solid oak table, a faded couch. But it was solid, and it was his, and now it was mine. On the table, centered as if on an altar, was a wooden box. Inside, I found 3 things. First, a stack of letters tied with a string in Daniel's familiar handwriting. The top one began, "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry." Tears flowed freely now, but they were different. They were cleansing. He wrote about buying this place as a secret escape, a dream of someday fixing it up with me, a place for us and the kids to get away from everything. He wrote about his worries, his hopes, his immense love for me. The second item was a set of basic, high-quality hand tools, a hammer, screwdrivers, a wrench set, with a note, "For all the things you've ever fixed. Now fix this for you." He knew me. He knew I found solace in doing and making. The third was a cashier's check, not for a fortune, but for a meaningful amount. The note attached read, "For the roof, the porch, and whatever else your heart desires." A little fund I kept on the side. Love, always, D. That was the moment I decided to stay. Not just visit, stay. The next day, I met my nearest neighbor, Frank, a retired carpenter in his 70s, with a kind, wrinkled face and hands that knew wood. He'd known Daniel had helped him with the initial inspection of the place. When I told him what had happened, he simply nodded, spat thoughtfully off the porch, and said, "Well then, let's get that south-facing window sealed before winter." And so I began. I learned to use the tools. Frank taught me how to replace shingles, how to sand and restain the porch floor. I planted a modest kitchen garden in a sunny patch. I bought a second-hand rocking chair and placed it on the porch. In the evenings, I would read Daniel's letters, one at a time, letting his voice fill the quiet. I started a journal of my own, not of grief, but of rebuilding. I titled it Haven Ridge Year 1. I began volunteering at the tiny Bartlett Library, just shelving books at first, then reading aloud to children on Saturday mornings. Slowly, tentatively, I began to exchange emails with Ethan. He wrote about missing his dad, about the strange tension at home. I wrote back, not with criticism of his mother, but with stories of his father at his age, with simple statements of love. I was building a new life, not on the ashes of the old one, but on the solid, loving foundation my son had secretly laid for me. It has been a year and a half now. The cabin is warm and tight against the mountain winters. The porch no longer creaks alarmingly. My garden yielded a small crop of tomatoes and basil last summer. Frank and I share a pot of coffee every Friday morning. He is a friend, a kindred spirit in solitude. The pain of losing Daniel is a part of me, a quiet companion, but it no longer defines me. The searing hurt from Pamela's actions has cooled into a distant, sad understanding. She was driven by fear and a brittle kind of control. I pity her. She has the big house and the bank accounts, but she lost the thread of what mattered most. Ethan is planning to visit this summer. He got his driver's license. Lily sends me drawings sometimes. The connection is fragile, but it is real, and it is ours, not filtered through anyone else. I learned something profound in these mountains, away from the polished cruelty of that lawyer's office. I learned that the greatest gift is not what you are given, but what they try to take from you, your dignity, your memories, your rightful place in the story of someone you love. Daniel did not give me a house. He gave me back to myself. He gave me a place to remember that real love can never be locked out of a will or confiscated by greed. It lives in humble places. It lives in shared memories. It lives in the daily choice to build again from the broken pieces, not with bitterness, but with the profound knowing that you were loved truly and deeply in the most real way. Haven Ridge is not where I ran away to. It is where I arrived. It is where my heart belongs. And I think in the end, that is all any of us are searching, for a place where our heart belongs. I found mine in a Kia cabin, in the enduring love of a son who knew his mother's heart better than anyone. I wonder in your life, what is your Haven Ridge? What is that one thing, that memory, that place, or that quiet, knowing that reminds you of who you truly are, especially when others try to tell you otherwise? I would be so honored if you shared your thoughts with me down in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength, please give this video a like. It lets me know I'm not just speaking into the void. And if you would like to join me for more stories of finding light after the darkest hours, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, no matter what they try to take, your story and your heart are yours to keep. Be well, friends.